I'll get started. Hi, I'm Ruth Leopold. Thank you for coming to my sketch session. And I just want to start by asking, just with a show of hands, who has used Sketch before? Cool. How about Illustrator or Photoshop? Cool. So my hope is that after seeing this presentation, you'll be able to go on your own and get your hands in Sketch and be able to use a file that somebody gives you and navigate your way around it, get assets, and even create in Sketch. I am a designer and a front-end developer for Redfin Solutions. I've been working there for a year now, although I had an internship before that, and this is actually my third year talking about Sketch at D4D. Hopefully the most successful one yet, and hopefully the first where the recording actually works. So I've been using Sketch since I started my internship at Redfin Solutions, and it was actually one of my first assignments, was to learn how to use it and to present to my coworkers so that they could learn how to use it too. And then that turned into presenting to 20, 25 people at D4D, so it was a good experience. And what I really like about Sketch as opposed to Illustrator or Photoshop is that it is specifically made for user interface design. So I still go back to Illustrator to make a logo or an icon or anything that's really an advanced SVG, and I still go back to Photoshop for photo editing. So how many of you are designers in this room? Oh, good. So this is really aimed at people who maybe don't have as much design experience, although I hope everyone will get value out of it. So I'm going to start by just going over the basic design structure so that you understand the setup of these kind of documents. So I want you to imagine that you have a bunch of pieces of paper in front of you, and this one in front of you has homepage written across the top of it. And you have sticky notes, and you're putting sticky notes on top of that page. And then you have stickers, and you're putting stickers on top of the sticky note. And then you take the sticky note off the page, hand it to your developer, which is maybe you, and say, make this into a web page. So how that looks in Sketch is kind of like this. That piece of page is called a page in Sketch, and it's just a workspace for artboards and layers. So this is a page I would have for maybe a home page, and I have on it the design for a desktop, a tablet, and a mobile view. And then I also have some, because I can be a little bit messy, I also have on that same page some hover states, how I got my color scheme. And this is what, more specifically, an artboard and the layers on an artboard look like. You have this tablet artboard. It's zoomed in on the page. You can see that you are selected onto Mother Earth hosts our travels, and it's highlighted in that left column. So that text object, that's a layer. And anything that is below or above it in this section is also a layer. So if it was actually below Hero, which is a group that has a rectangle and image below it, inside of it, then that image would be on top of it. It would be layered on top of it, and you wouldn't be able to see the text at all. So you can see all these layers are in the tablet artboard, and that artboard is within page 1. So that's the basic setup, and that left column is where you look to kind of see where you are within your sketch file. The right column, on the other hand, gives you the information about the object that you're selected on. So on the same text object, you can see that it's Gotham, it's bold, it's a particular color, it's a particular size. And you also have some tools for alignment there at the top. So you could see that that is aligned to the center of the artboard. Now, vectors are an important part of Sketch and any design and the web. And the cool thing about Sketch is, like Illustrator, the objects are vectors, meaning they're shapes with points and angles. But on Sketch, as opposed to on Illustrator, they're all on a pixel grid. So you might have a mobile artboard that is 320 pixels wide, and then the objects that you put on top of it are vectors. So this is what a vector might look like. If it's a star, it's going to have points connecting the star. And that is the path of the vector. It's the path is the connection of the points. If you have a circle, on the other hand, which has, those curves, you can see from the anchor points, you have handles, and then moving those handles will give you different curves. So vectors are scalable because they're composed of math. Unlike something like an image that is pixel-based, if you were to zoom into an image, you would just see a grid of different colored pixels. If you were to zoom into a vector, it would continue to have that smooth shape because it's just math. So this is an example of vector versus pixel. Like I said before, the vector would be the star, and if you zoomed into the point, it would still be very crisp. And if you zoomed into that cloud, you would see that grid of pixels. And you can see over here what would show up in the left column. You actually can see what the shape of the vector is in that little preview. Whereas the photo that you've imported into Sketch just has a generic preview of a photo. So as I said before, it is Sketch gives you vectors on a grid of pixels. So when you're actually on the web and you're looking at your phone, often the stuff on it isn't still vectors when you're looking at it. So the nice thing that Sketch lets you do is it lets you preview what your designs look like when you show the pixels. So this is already really zoomed in. It might actually be taking up this much space on a phone. So you can see actually what those pixels would look like. Now, if you're getting designs from a designer, you might encounter something that is called a mask. And what a mask is if you take a shape and an image, or maybe two shapes, and you combine them so that one of them hides everything around that shape. So it's as if you were to have a sticker sheet, and you take the sticker off and put it to the side, and then you take that back end of the sticker, that stuff that's left from the sticker sheet, and you put it down on a photo. Does that make sense? It hides everything that is not in that shape. So you can see here what that ends up looking like in Sketch. Now when you have that, you now have three things that you can edit. You can edit the mask shape itself. You can stretch it, change its size. You can edit the image. You can edit where it is. You can move it around, make it bigger or smaller. Or you can edit what is doing the masking, which in this case is the star. So that would be editing the mask itself, the group. That would be editing the image. and that would be editing the mask itself. And it's all about what you're selected on. So as you're going through these design files, be aware of what you're actually clicked on in that left column. So when you are adding shapes into Sketch, such as a triangle, that's a pretty easy thing to just kind of add and export. But when you want something more complex, such as an icon or a logo, there are tools in Sketch that you can use to make those more complex shapes. And those are the Boolean operation tools. And that's something that Illustrator has as well, maybe Photoshop. And that lets you add shapes together, subtract them. You can do intersect and difference, which I didn't get into. But you can see me selecting two, adding them together, subtracting another shape, so that you have this now complex SVG. And you can see here how those triangles have added up into that combined shape. Now, once you have those all added together and you have union on some of them, subtract on some of them, in Sketch it's still really all those triangles that have been added together. So at this point you can move those triangles around, you can edit what the SVG looks like. But if you are satisfied with the shape and now you want to go in and edit the completed shape, then you can use the flatten tool. And that takes those different triangles, and instead of being a collection of triangles, you can see it has its own anchor point. It's one shape. And then after doing that, you can use the export feature. So that is in the bottom right corner. And when you export, you can choose the format. So if you export as a PNG, that is pixel-based, and whatever size that shape is in Sketch, that's what it's going to export as into a PNG when you do this. If you add another export, such as an SVG, then what you're getting is the actual SVG, which you can now open the code of. You can even change the color and the size in code. So I'll go over some tips and tricky things that you might encounter as you're using these design files. Probably my favorite thing that I've discovered about Sketch is this trick. You take the Sketch file, I like to copy and paste it so I still have the original. You change the end of it to .zip. Your computer's like, are you sure you really want to do this? You probably don't want to do this, but you do it. And then you extract it, you double click it, and it gives you all the assets in it. So you go in, you go to the images folder, and there's all your images. Another one of my favorite things about Sketch is the Alt key. I'm surprised this key isn't broken from how much I use it. What Alt allows you to do is just by holding it down when you're selected on something and moving it around, it allows you to see the distance between one thing and another. So I select on Mountaineers, I hover over the logo mark, I see the distance, and then I push it over a couple arrows. And then I select both of them, and then I can see the distance from the artboard, and I can center it that way. So another thing you're going to come across in Sketch is layers. And, sorry, not layers, is groups. And groups are literally a group of layers. So I have a group for my header in this. And if I want to select on trails, I click on the group and I have to double click to get into the layers in the group, and I get to trails. So if I want to change trails, pictures, and log in to make the font size bigger, I have to click on the group, double click, click on the group, double click, click on the group, double click. Actually, double click again for login because that button is also a group. So the nice thing that Sketch lets you do is this nice button, Select Groups Content on Click. So if you're selected on a group, you hit that checkbox, and instead of now when you go and click in that area, instead of highlighting the whole group, it lets you click on the things in the group. And you only have to do that once, and then forever until you uncheck that button, you can go right and select down to the level that you want. So you can see here, instead of doing each one of these individually, I can select Trails Pictures and log in at the same time and change the font size for all of those. Another important checkbox in Sketch is include and export when you are exporting an artboard. So that's when you have this artboard and it's a blue background and you have your logo on it, and instead of exporting the whole thing with a blue background, you just want the logo because you just want to put it in the corner of your site. That's where this checkbox comes in. You have the background color and you include it in export, or you don't include it in export. It's pretty simple, but it's an important one that you might come across. Another thing that might trip you up is when your designer or you put multiple fonts inside of one text box. Has anybody used InVision before or heard of it? InVision is something that we use to put our sketch files on so it can transition more easily from design to development. But when you use something like that, or when somebody is just going in and selecting on that text box, what they see is that first image. They see, in Sketch they see multiple weights, but in InVision they might just see bold. So once you actually double click and get into editing the text, that's when you can see the different fonts. The ideal way is to not put different fonts in the same box, but it happens, and it's good to know about. Another thing that you might come across, you might have come across it in Illustrator, is outlining text. So when you want to, for an example, when you're making a logo and you want to make the text, the letters into shapes, not letters anymore, so that you can make it into an SVG, for example, you convert to outlines. Once it's converted to outlines, it's no longer, it's a font, but it's kind of no longer a font. It's now just shapes. So when you're clicking around in Sketch and you're trying to get the font of a particular object or a particular text box, and it's not giving it to you, that's probably because it is now a shape. And you can kind of see in these sidebars the change that makes. It goes from being, you can see kind of the text icon that Sketch gives you into all these paths. And you can see from all these particular attributes like color and typeface, you now just have the fill color. Another thing that you might come across is photos that have been edited in Sketch. And you can see this on the right sidebar again with blending and with color adjust. And my advice for this, if your designer has given you something, has given you a photo that's been edited in Sketch, would be to go back to them and say, edit this in Photoshop. And another thing that might trip you up if you're not used to it is locked layers and hidden layers. And the sign for these is next to one of the layers there's a little eye, which means that that layer is hidden, you can't see it on the artboard at all, or a lock. And what might hint you toward a layer being locked is when you're clicking on it, or you're trying to click on it on the artboard, and nothing's happening, nothing's selecting. So then you can go in to this left sidebar, and you can just click those, and they'll go off, and then you can get the image or whatever you need off of the artboard. How much time do I have? What time is this end? Started at 2:30, so 2:20, 3:20.
3:20.
Okay, great. Awesome. So I'm going to go through a few kind of design ideas, design tips that you can use in Sketch. So I mentioned earlier an easy way to get color schemes was to get it from an image. And so I'll create a grid of squares. I'll have a dark one for text maybe, and a light one for a background, and some highlight ones in the middle. And Control-C opens up this color dropper for you. So if you're selected on a square, and then you do Control-C, then you get this color dropper, and you can hover it all over your image and select the color that you want. So if you ever have the opportunity or are forced into the position of deciding on text weights for a document or a page, hierarchy is something to consider. So if you have your heading text and you have your body text, and they look kind of the same, and you have a whole page of it, then it just looks like you have this whole kind of blah page of text that nobody wants to read. And it is even difficult to read. But when you use things like contrast in colors, in weights and sizes, and line heights, that's when you really get that hierarchy going, and the text really becomes easier to read, and it's more accessible and user-friendly. So Sketch has a lot of alignment tools, or it has 2 alignment tools that you can use. So when you are arranging text on a page, you don't want things to just be free-floating, because a user doesn't know where to look, they don't know how things are, they don't really know the hierarchy. So Sketch gives you these alignment tools on the top right column. And what it lets you do is it lets you arrange things in relation to each other like this, or actually arrange them on the artboard. So you can see in this example, only the top and the bottom one really go to the left. And that's because this middle one is actually already to the left, but the text itself is center aligned. So then you can go in and left align that as well. And that is what you have in the end. Now when you're given a sketch file and suddenly you have to create something for yourself, you need a new button and you can't get in touch with your designer, you don't want to bother them, you can use some of the patterns that they have created throughout the design. And there are a few easy ways to get these. One is might be the most useful thing to you from this presentation, it's copy CSS attributes. So you go in, you right click, left click, one of those, and on some kind of object, maybe text, and then you hit copy CSS attributes. And then you can go and paste them in a text box or in your code. And it gives you all the things that Sketch knows how to give you. So then if you need a filter, you have this button, and you need a filter. You can use that. You can use those CSS attributes, and you can modify them a little bit. So from this one to this one, I used the same font family. I used the same font size. I think I used a similar border and border radius. Another thing notable in Sketch is symbols. And symbols can be a little bit complicated. Jennifer back there might go over them in her Sketch discussion. But the basic idea of symbols is that you have these layers, and they have this circle arrow thing next to them. And they are this reusable component that exists in one place on your symbols page. And you can go and put all over your different artboards and different pages. And when you change one symbol, so say I change this climb button from being a round to being a square, all of the other buttons that are using that same symbol change throughout your Sketch file. Text styles is a similar kind of idea, a little simpler, I think. It's pretty much you have a text box, and it has maybe a certain color, a certain size, a certain weight, a certain font. And you create a text style. And then again, if you change that somewhere, it can change, you can update it to change all the other text styles that are the same thing. So my biggest advice to start using Sketch is to start using Sketch. So I put my design file that I made for this on bit.ly/sketch4all. So you can download it and start playing around with it, see if you can find the thing that I accidentally left hidden and show it. And Jennifer and I will be giving a BOF tomorrow during the last session. So if you want to start using that and want help, you can come to that, and we'll just be walking around, I think, and helping with anything you need. So if you are interested in Sketch still after this, and you want to learn more, you can go to Jennifer's session, which is at 2:30 tomorrow. And if you have any questions, you can contact me. And thank you very much. And questions? Yes?
You can ask if anybody has any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Can you talk a little about setting up style sheets, text styles?
Text styles?
Yeah.
Sure. I think I have it open up. Close this. Escape. How do I close it? There we go. I'll bring my sketch file up. Okay, so I have this, which you can see here has no text style. And I have this button, which is actually a symbol. And this text does have a text style. So if I had more, they would show up here. I think if I changed it.
So that's just like Word basically over there, you find your style.
Sorry, what?
That's basically like setting up a style in Word or something
Mhm.
on the right over there.
And yeah, and then I think I have to update text style. So now when I click on it, it has that thing. And you can see this one actually updated because it has the same text style. Do you want me to explain more?
No,
Or?
that's good. And then, there's a collection of symbols somewhere, right? And how do you move
Yes.
a symbol from one kind of page to another?
Okay, so
Like if you wanted a footer on every page, it would be created.
yes. So this is my symbols page. I have my buttons, I have this trail card, but my header really should be a symbol if I had thought ahead. So I have this as a group here, and I can create a symbol from it. And that'll go right to the symbols page. Shows up here. And then this tablet. So,
Do you want to put, because I think I know what he's asking.
mhm.
Like being able to go to insert and find symbols from any other
Insert
file.
symbol, yeah.
That's under your preferences.
Oh, okay.
If you go to the preferences and click on libraries, you go to sketch preferences and yeah, and then if you click on library, right there, if you see where it says add library, if you take any file that you've created that has symbols in it and add it to your library, when you go under insert, it'll list that file and then all the symbols that are in it.
That's perfect.
Mm.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add, once you have the symbol on that symbols page, you can go to insert symbols and then put it right on your artboard.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
Can you edit or enter CSS to
Um,
apply to objects?
I don't, not that I've come across. I don't think so. All I've found is being able to get to that copy CSS attributes. Yeah. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm pretty early, so if anybody wants me to demo anything else, feel free to ask.
You go back to this one.